on a tight schedule. Okay, just to introduce Ren Chun. I've only just kind of encountered his poetry. I think at one of Theo's readings. He was there, and I heard about his book of poems, and I got hold of it. I've started to read it, I think twice as long as Theo's. I don't know if that's significant in some ways. And I've been encountering the poems, and I thought it was quite interesting. I found in one of the poems, there's a line that says, "No one has ever asked me how I write poetry." Well, we're going to ask him now, anyway. And hopefully Ren Chun is going to talk to us a little bit about a poem that one poem you've written, well, Streetlights and Shrines and Streetlights, and then you're going to go on to talk about a more recent poem.
Okay. Yeah, so today I will first talk about my poem Shrines and Streetlights. It's more of it's quite a straightforward conversational kind of poem. Hang on, let me just. Okay, so yeah, just because I have twice the number of poems, it still doesn't mean that it's twice as bad. So maybe I must compensate with quantity rather than quality. But I less experienced, but I'm making my way. So this poem is the title poem for my first collection, Shrines and Streetlights, and I chose the poem because, like I said, it was quite simple and straightforward, but there's an emotional meaning behind it, and there's things for me to talk about. So immediately from the title we get seemingly binary opposites. We have shrines and streetlights, and but the question, like, one seems to stand for traditional reverence, the other one seems to stand for like urban establishment, stuff like that. But the question is maybe they're more similar than we seem. That ultimately it's still man-made light, and like in pain, darkness, or sorrow, the light that we make for ourselves is more or less the same. Anyway, this poem was actually written after a few months after my grandmother passed away, in a while ago. So I was just dealing with those feelings of like a loss and a sorrow. So okay, when choosing when the poem began, I was thinking about first of all the placement of the words, right? The enjambment, like see, in the first stanza here, the months after you passed were surreal, the past locked away in uneasy textures of sorrow. Yeah, so there's the purposeful enjambment to cut the line off, to cut the first line, the months after you passed were, and then surreal. To put the emphasis on the feeling of the surreal feeling that the scenario had, that I was still had not really come to terms yet with my grandma's passing, that it still seemed like a surreal situation. And next, I wanted to use the phrase, the uneasy textures of sorrow, this kind of tactile imagery, because the idea was that equating that emotion of sorrow with a sensation of uneasy textures, because for me, what I think of as sorrow is probably different from what any one of you would think of sorrow. So for you to think of your own idea of those uneasy textures is something left for the reader to think of himself, define himself in his mind, of how that emotion comes across, like those uneasy textures. In the next stanza, and now only this gelatinous concave canvas, moments stuck together without much meaning. So once again, I start the next stanza with an "and." So it's almost as though like I had to take a breath and pause and after the uneasy textures of sorrow, to think about what to say next. And the sense that concave canvas, yes, it's alliterative, that it stresses that echoing sound of emptiness. But once again, like that seems ironic with gelatinous, right? But in the sense that it's like almost like this pit that it's like drawing me in, and like like closing in around me. Okay, so just to go ahead. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this poem, I had a lot of words that I was using alliteration, using like in the next part harshly hissed syllables to re-emphasize that harsh sharp kind of sound, and it's like a slow pace. It's kind of like a very like there's this feeling of incompleteness and like laborious kind of motion that I wanted to bring across. And I mean, as Theo was saying just now, I guess like the internal forces, what's happening inside you is what that comes out in the poem, right? And in the sense that I guess like dealing with all these like dealing with all these emotions I made, like the poem was taking form in this very like tiring way with all these words that the sound was okay. Well, all right. So I'll just go down further stanza by stanza. So the next part, I imagine in the old days, bodies would weather rivers of autumn, and vast clearings would let souls float out to new summer suns. So in this sense, the significance of the phrase "rivers of autumn." I mean, autumn is that season where the leaves fall from the trees. It precedes the barrenness of winter, and for me, it's just a simple. It's like a metaphor for aging and death. Yeah, I mean, one of the main things about this poem is that basically, I guess to give a bit of context, was that my grandmother, she grew up in China, and then in quite a rural environment, and in a sense that when she went on to go to Shanghai and then study in America and then come to Singapore, which are all like big cities. But when she used to tell me stories of her childhood and everything, she would never really want to tell me. She doesn't really seem to like to tell me stories about what it was like in Shanghai, or what it was like when she went to like New York back then, or like what it's like living in Singapore for her so much. But her stories always seem to have more emphasis on like the hills she used to play in when she was a child, or like when she went to university, the lake that she would like sit by or swim in, and she loved like the autumn, like the cherry blossoms, the trees, the seasons and stuff like that. So in a sense that in those days after her past, when she was in a coma, and when she was in coma, and I would go and visit like the hospital, and that trip to the hospital and like to back, and all these tall towering buildings, and they seem like so encompassing and like a trap, like, and it felt like maybe her spirit would have a very difficult time trying to leave and to find some peace in like in all those like those fields above that she liked so much. So in that sense, one of the themes of this poem is that frustration with all these like these buildings and this urban environment. So yeah, and so for example in this part, but now must ghosts go through our urban maze, like passengers from an airplane or kites from a cage. I mean, I guess like kites from a cage, it's as though that they need their freedom, right? They need to set loose. But at the same time, passengers from an airplane, it kind of suggests that that death is a destination, and like yeah, I don't this part, like, okay, all right, so